Welcome back to another episode of The Loco Fit Show, where we redefine what healthy means to you. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon. I'm with Coach Karina today.
Hey guys.
And we're going to be talking about her journey of coming off of birth control. So first and foremost, if you are watching this, you're going to be like, what is this kind of weird setup? We don't have the mics in front of us because the SD card got stuck in the recording thing that we use. So if you're listening, you're going to hear that the sound is not so great. We apologize, but we did want to get this podcast out. So if you're watching and it looks kind of weird, that's why. If you're listening and you're like, what's going on? That's also why. But hey, we're still going to put out the information. Yeah, and we wanted to have this discussion because you came off birth control 4 months ago?
Beginning of June.
Okay.
So 4 months ago.
Okay. And this disclaimer, this is not a podcast on like the horrors or the benefits of birth control. We're not going to get into this. We're not going to get into like the choice behind it. Like we fully support that everybody makes a decision that's best for them. We're simply going to be sharing your story of this. And I want to say that because I feel like so many times, especially in the fitness space, it's just made out to be like this really, really negative thing. Mm-hmm. And while there can be negative side effects for certain people, like there's also a lot of benefits for certain people. So I don't want it to like paint it to be this like monster, which then makes people who maybe feel like they actually need it for birth control protective reasons to then feel bad about being on it.
Right, yeah, and there is a lot of, so there's like almost this wave of people coming off of it right now, only because there actually has been quite a bit of research coming out saying something about it. I'm not going to actually say it because I'm not very well versed, so I don't want to risk saying the wrong thing about the research. However, the tricky part with correlative data is that it's correlative. Like we don't actually know which variables are coming into play, and that data is much more reliable after we've seen like years and years and years and years of evidence. But a lot of people are coming off of it right now. My decision to come off of it had kind of been from I had kind of noticed some physical changes happen, or maybe lack thereof, when I started it, and I just wanted to experiment to see how it would look or what would happen if I came off. Mm-hmm. Also, again, from the research that I have seen, I have not seen all the research, but I tried, and what we try to encourage all of our clients to do is make informed decisions. I gathered the most information I possibly could find and made my own decision based off of that. And just for my long-term hormonal health, I have goals to have kids, and not saying that there is any evidence to show that birth control causes infertility. Absolutely. Obviously, I'm sure there are some crazy cases, but that's essentially one of the main drivers as to why I decided to come off of birth control.
Yeah, I think those are all really important reasons. Yeah. And I think that some of the negative stuff that comes out, at least from like the fitness space, is there are a lot of people who are put on birth control as like a band-aid for certain things, right?
Right. And like PCOS, like acne, all that stuff.
Okay, and maybe that is what somebody needs, right? But it sometimes shouldn't be the first line of defense. Right, so I think a lot of the coaches and practitioners who speak out negatively are speaking on it in those terms, which again, I understand.
Yeah. If you don't want babies, birth control is great.
Yeah, like if you're
definitely use it.
If your main reason is birth control, I think that is very valid, and I think that people need to take that into consideration. However, using it as a band-aid for other things certainly shouldn't be the first goal. And I think that there's a lot of people who are, all the negative stuff that's come out about it is because of that. People felt, I felt misled about this and and that's understandable.
That's kind of true.
It's kind of like a lot of pharmaceuticals, right? There's a lot of drugs that people are just there's not really a large conversation about it. Yeah. It's just like, hey, this will help you with this. We're not really going to talk about the side effects or the risks or when we would start it, when we would stop it. There's a lot of times a conversation that's maybe just a few minutes about it, if that, like ADHD is a really common one, right? And of course, people with ADHD may or may not need medication. Right. But a lot of times it's like a 3-minute conversation where it's like, you have these symptoms. Okay, well, here's the script. And it's like no discussion about like when to take this, how to take this. Should you take this every day? Like all these kinds of, like none of that. Just like here's the script.
Yeah.
And how's this going to affect you? And that's where it's like, I think a lot of practitioners get frustrated, especially with the birth control conversation.
Yeah.
So what were some of the symptoms that you were noticing that you kind of touched on?
So the main reason why I wanted to come off was, like I said, just want to make sure that I am doing everything I can to make sure that when I do decide to have kids, there will be no issue when I decide for that to happen. I personally don't have a whole lot of medical history on my mom and my mother's side of the family. So I don't really know, what her health is in that space. So I'm basically just kind of shooting blind and making sure that I do everything I can to make sure that when that time comes, I'm ready, my body's healthy, hormones are in a good place. Second piece of that was I found that after I had been on it for at this point 3 years consecutively, I had a really hard time putting on muscle. I should first mention that my body type I think is a bit more, I'm not a total ectomorph, but I'm just looking at my family, I'm definitely in the gene pool where it's not as easy for me to put on muscle. I need a lot more volume, I need a lot more food, and I need a lot more time, whereas there's other people who are fantastic responders. And so I kind of noticed that I might be not losing muscle, but I just had a harder time putting on muscle than I feel like I had in the past. And so just doing some research, obviously.
Without really any training, you weren't not training as much.
No,
right?
I was
you're probably
killing
training more.
myself. Yeah.
If anything.
Yeah, and so, and I kind of noticed that there were some recovery issues and things like that. Over time, just my recovery felt different. I felt like it took longer for me to recover. Biggest part was I knew that, and I definitely still have plenty of time to put on some muscle, but the rate at which I could put on muscle in my 20s was running out. So I was let me try to utilize this time as much as I possibly can and stop suppressing an androgenic hormone like estrogen and kind of let my body have its normal estrogen levels, because that's essentially what my birth control was doing, was suppressing it so that I don't get pregnant and all of those things. So I just wanted to really maximize my ability to put on muscle at that time. And so for me, and I was able to do this, I was okay, let me get off of birth control to see if this helps with my ability to put on muscle and if it changes my body composition at all. So I'm only 4 months in. I don't really think there's a whole lot of physical change that I could see in 4 months. But that was my main decision. So I had also spoken to a physician about that, and they were yeah, I think that's a viable reason, go ahead. And so I decided to come off. Some of the symptoms that I experienced in the first 3 months so far that I can talk about at this point.
Which one are you taking, just so people know? Because there's obviously a bunch of different types. You were taking an oral.
I was taking an oral combination pill contraceptive. I think it was called Junolfi 120. It was quite a low dose. It wasn't crazy.
You were on I think the 1/20, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's honestly probably one of the more common ones.
Yeah.
As far as a low dose. So if anybody remembers low estrogen, they've changed the name a million times. That's the one name I always remember.
Yeah.
It's typically this 1:20 ratio of the synthetic progesterone and estrogen, so it's a progestin. But so most oral pills are going to be a combination of those. And then there's varying amounts, which would consider very low dose, more moderate dose. And then of course the other options are the IUDs or any other kind of implant, the arm implant that's Nexaplon, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the IUD is either a progestin-based IUD like Mirena, or the copper IUD, which is non-hormonal but uses copper to kill off the sperm. Mm-hmm. And then I feel there's another one.
There's the ring.
The NuvaRing, and then is there another one? Regardless, most common, I would say most people, at least again the pool that we work with, would be oral contraceptives or IUDs.
Yeah.
And then you were on a pretty standard one.
Yeah, I was on an oral contraceptive, nothing crazy, combination pill. So I decided to come off of it. Before I decided to come off of it, I made sure to do a lot of research to support my body in making this transition to trying to level out my hormones. I knew that taking out my birth control, there was a very fair chance that I could become estrogen dominant very fast. Do you want to kind of go over like the side effects that could happen with estrogen dominance?
Yeah, so typically when we think about estrogen dominance, it's going to be obviously a higher ratio of estrogen to progesterone. There's always going to be a higher ratio, but it's going to be like a significantly higher. And the biggest thing that birth control does is suppress progesterone, hence you're not ovulating. That's the whole point of birth control. So it's already going to be super, super low because of whatever birth control that you're on, if you're on a pill. So then when you're coming off, it's going to take time to bounce back. But then now, like without the pill, the estrogen many times can really, really spike.
Yeah.
So for some people, when they have estrogen dominance, there's typically like a different fat distribution that we see. Some people talk about, mood swings. Some people have skin changes. So those would be kind of the more common ones that I have at least experienced with clients and seen. And particularly kind of a harder time, especially if you're getting into like a deficit, potentially having a harder time losing weight.
It's been very difficult for a lot of people that I've worked with. If they go into it being estrogen dominant, it is very difficult for them to lose any
the
weight.
Fluctuations are usually pretty pronounced too, like the fluid retention. So anytime I have a client who doesn't metabolize estrogen very well, that's going to be a really common thing that they see, is just a lot of fluid accumulation, a lot of weight scale changes. Like, hey, I just woke up, I'm super inflamed, I'm super puffy.
Inflammation was a big one that I usually see. They'll usually put on a lot of weight quite quickly, and then they'll also feel like inflamed. They have a really hard time recovering from really hard workouts. Like it takes days, and they can feel like I'm puffy in my fingers and like my face.
The fingers, like literally, like every client who says that, like they're like, I wake up and my fingers are swollen. And it's like that's not something that was probably dietary, because if you've slept all night, there's big shifts there.
I mean, like it's normal for there to be some swelling when you wake up, just because of the distribution of your fluids when you're sleeping. But like just even in their arms and their legs, like you can almost like see it. So I wanted to make sure that I was doing everything I could to mitigate the chances of that happening to me, obviously, because I knew that was something that is very likely when people come off of birth control. So what I did was I looked into ways I started at lifestyle. Okay, what can I do with my lifestyle, stress management, activity, and diet to mitigate maybe a less favorable transition and support like my hormones coming back into place as they should on their own. So I really just tried to keep stress minimal. So stress management was a huge thing. Exercise, obviously, I think
kind of
all the time. Like you should always exercise. One thing that was really sorry, I'm like blanking out on the word, but important to do was to make sure that you did sweat a lot to like essentially detox the liver of all of like the hormones. So I would train in the morning, and sometimes I would try to train again in the evening, or just go in Florida, like it's a sauna outside. So I'd go for a run or a walk and just make sure I got sweaty. Like just sweat more often.
You could sauna.
Yeah, you could sauna to try to kind of detox the liver of all of the synthetic hormones. So that's what I tried to make sure I did the first 4 weeks, is just sweat a bit more, which again in Florida super easy. And
especially when you did it, like if you did it now, like in June.
Especially in CrossFit gyms with no AC, like I'm good. Keep stress management, making sure I'm getting plenty of sleep, making sure that I'm recovering, sweating a lot, and then for diet, I looked up a lot of progesterone-rich foods. So a lot of cruciferous vegetables, really. That's pretty much the only change that I had to make with my diet.
And that will help with estrogen metabolism.
So lots of like broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Trader Joe's literally has a bag called Cruciferous Crunch. So I would just literally buy that, blend it in a smoothie, and drink one every single day.
Can you taste that raw?
No, not if you have like frozen bananas, protein powder, berries. No, you can't taste it. It's perfect.
I mean, like, I feel like I don't ever taste like spinach, you know, but I haven't
Yeah,
added like
kale.
a bulky ass.
Yeah,
like,
no, and it makes it nice
Brussels
and thick.
sprouts.
Yeah, it makes it nice and thick because it is such
Yeah.
a rough
Ah.
texture. But I'll like buy a bunch of bags, keep them in the freezer even still, and
Yeah.
just like blend it for the micronutrients. And so then the other thing I did was like my third most important thing. So we went lifestyle, diet, supplements. So I started looking into supplements. I talked to other women who had gone through the process. And I started out with a progesterone cream that I put on in the morning and the evenings. And I can, share that if anyone is interested. And then I started on a supplement called Hormonal Harmony by Nourishwell. And it just had, I really liked the product because when I went on the website, because I looked at quite a few, I also looked at First Form's Harmony. I liked the ingredients that Nourishwell used. There was also a lot of like research and literature available on their website as to why those were helpful. So I just went with that option. It was also a bit like more affordable. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna give it a try. If it's not great, it's fine. I'll try another one. And so I supplemented with that daily. And for the first, so I'm now 4 months. I've literally had a period on the clock every month so far, which I was not expecting because
I will say that is
Yeah.
not normal.
yes, I was
So
like,
if you were coming
yeah.
off birth control and you
No.
don't get a cycle,
that's
okay.
why I'm like, this
Yeah.
is, so here's a few things as to why I think that happened. I think like healthy lifestyle, me being on top of like diet, supplementation, etc. But also I was only on birth control for 3 years. It's going to be very different for someone who's been on for like 10 plus years and then are deciding to come off. It might take a while. But most clients who I've worked with who have decided to come off of birth control, I have never seen them have a period sooner than 6 months. Personally, I don't know if, I can't remember off the top of my head if someone was on birth control less than 3 years like I was. I would say 3 years is not a super long time compared to a lot of, like just the population who've been on since they were, for 10 plus years, 8 plus years. So if you've been on for a long time without ever having a break, I think you can expect for it to take a little bit longer. So first month went by, got a period. I was like, okay, this is probably just like a withdrawal bleed, whatever. Like I'm sure my hormones are still going to take a long time because that's literally what I saw with every single client. It just took a while. I had one client who, on average, it took 8 months to a year. And so then second month, like 30 days on the clock, and I could literally feel, and I think what's helpful is like we're quite in tune with our bodies. So I can feel when I'm ovulating. I'm like, ow, that hurt. So then I've been able to track. Another reason I love the Oura Ring is that it also tracks your basal body temperature. It says, hey, your period might be here in like a few days. And then third month, again, on the clock. So I should be due here in a few days. We'll see if that comes up.
We'll keep you guys posted.
My streak, I'm like super proud of my streak here. But you never know because I have clients who like they get off of birth control, they have 3 periods in a row, and then like they skip a month, or like it just takes 6 weeks instead of 4 weeks. Everyone's very different here. And that's one thing to keep in mind is like everyone's cycle is very different.
Everyone's baseline, like coming into if they, pre-birth control.
Yeah.
Like you said, afterwards, what are you doing? There's a lot of different things, and I think that, being accepting of that, like, okay, when I come off, like, I don't know how I'm going to respond. I might get a cycle this month. It might take me several months. And I think that the unknown is what's super scary. Obviously, like especially most people who have a consistent cycle when they're on birth control. Not everybody, but most people do, or they just kind of stop getting one altogether. So then people are like, wait, like I was used to like not having anything, or like I was used to having it very, very consistent, and then afterwards it may change. So if you do get it right away, that's great. I've had clients both ways. I've had clients who, as soon as they get off, they start to have a normal cycle. Not everybody will have an ovulatory cycle right away, right? Like they might just be bleeding without ovulating. And then those are the best way to test that. They do have strips, but I would say if you can test, why is that so weird? If you can test your temperature, if you have an Oura Ring, it's already kind of built in. or you can just take a normal thermometer test.
Yeah.
And then that way you can actually track it a little bit more effectively. So, some people get it right away. Some people it takes, like you said, it can be up to a year or more.
Yeah.
And then when you're looking at a supplement for something like coming off birth control, like you said, you were using the progesterone cream. I've had some clients who have had really good success with that. There are people who don't respond as well to that either.
I should say that I only used that for like the first 3 weeks.
Okay.
And then I stopped.
Yeah.
Because I literally just forgot. And then I was like, oh, I'm getting a period, so I think I'm okay. I'm getting my blood work tomorrow, though, so we'll see.
Yeah, well, I do want to touch on that.
Yeah.
But, like, so for some people, they will have a really, really strong reaction to adding progesterone.
I didn't feel anything.
I know some people who legitimately, like, it's not good. But other people, it fixes a lot of their other symptoms for other things, right? So it's like, that's where there's so much inner, individual differences. And if you don't want to take progesterone, like a cream or even oral, like bioidentical, you can. Chaseberry is a natural supplement that is in a lot of those kind of hormone balancing products. So Chaseberry, and then a lot of the good products are going to have DIM in them, which will help with estrogen metabolism. Some products are going to also include things like ashwagandha to help with the stress management. So a lot of times you're going to see those types of products, and they're going to have multiple different things to kind of hit all of those pathways. And obviously, anything that you take that's a supplement that's over the counter is going to be significantly lower than something that is like prescribed, right? But that's the whole point, because it's over the counter. So could be a really great place to start, and then do that for a few months and then test. So you did that you took the progesterone cream for a few weeks.
Roughly the first month.
Yeah. And then you took the supplement for 3 months.
I'm still taking it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then so now you're gonna get blood work done around the 4-month mark.
Yeah. So I have blood work scheduled for tomorrow. It was supposed to be done like 2 weeks ago, but we had like the hurricanes, things came up. But so I'm getting blood work done tomorrow. So then I'll be actually able to see like, okay, should I still be supplementing with this as progesterone, in a healthy level, etc. Two other things.
Estrogen too, to see like where that's at.
Yeah. So I do want to talk about like some symptoms that as soon as I came off of birth control, I could feel like very different. First one, I think third week I was off, I had so much energy. It was crazy. Like I felt like an Energizer bunny. Like I could just keep in. A lot of factors come into play. At this point, I was already done with the master's program for about a month, so I felt like energized and I wasn't like completely drained. But I just felt like a different level of energy that I haven't had before. Now that I have a normal period and a normal cycle, I can very much like tell, okay, I have more energy right now. And then once I move into that luteal phase, like, okay, I'm a bit more tired and a bit more achy. And I can feel those fluctuations in energy a lot more. Which is I really love, because I can almost use my menstrual cycle as a framework to position my CrossFit training. So in the follicular phase, when I'm feeling good, energy's good, recovery's good, I'll train really heavy, I'll work on my Olympic lifts, my strength stuff. And then in the luteal phase, when I'm a bit more tired, recovery's a little bit more tough, I'll focus more on like aerobic capacity gymnastics training, which has been working for me for the last few months. So that's one thing that I noticed was a benefit, was I did feel like a change in energy. Some people who I've talked to who've gotten off of birth control have mentioned that, like their energy levels have improved. Some people who are still on birth control, like I feel fine, like energy is fine. And then the other thing I've kind of noticed is that I do feel like my body composition is a little bit better. I won't necessarily attribute that only to coming off of birth control, because my diet has also gotten better. Because I felt forced to improve my diet now that like I'm taking out these synthetic hormones. So whether that is diet and birth control combined or only diet, that's a benefit that I've experienced. So the only negative thing I've experienced is obviously one of the biggest pros to getting on birth control for some people is like your skin is super clear and really nice. One thing that I noticed immediately was my like face just became so oily. Like I had like normal to almost dry skin texture, but now like if I touch my face, it's like I just picked up a stick of butter. Like my face is so oily. And so I'm hoping that it's just kind of like a symptom of like the beginning when hopefully my hormones level out, my skin gets better. I have an appointment to like see a dermatologist for consultation soon. So I'll also let you know how that goes.
We'll do a follow-up.
So many testings.
A few months.
But my skin got so oily, and with that, my breakouts have gotten like I haven't broken out this bad since. And it's not like cystic acne. It's just like a lot of breakouts from like me sweating a lot from working out daily almost. So that's just the only negative thing. It's like, wow, my skin is looking rough. Which basically I just have to be more on top of my skin routine. And probably just do facials more often and things like that. But overall, like it's been smooth, which I'm very thankful for, because like we coach people all the time, and I've coached quite a few people who have made the decision like I want to come off of birth control, and I'm like, okay, let's see how your weight responds, let's see how you feel in training, let's see what dietary changes we need to make. This experience has been really helpful for me in a coaching perspective, because obviously like I've gone through it. I know some things to recommend now the more I've learned. So yeah, I think that's about it. But yeah, getting blood work done tomorrow. Definitely wanted to wait for at least 3 months to go by to let things kind of normalize. So now we're going into month 4, so I don't know, maybe like post an update on blood work and all that stuff. But
yeah, I think that with anytime you're looking at blood work, like if you have unlimited resources, obviously it would be cool to like do it right when you got off, and then in 3 months and 6 months. But that's like fantasy land for most people, right? Because blood work is really expensive.
Yeah,
so
had it covered.
Yeah, and most of the time this is not going to be covered because
it's just like you want to see it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily medically necessary, so the insurance isn't going to cover it, obviously.
Right.
So whenever you go to the doctors, like that's just generally why. So when you do out-of-pocket blood work, it's amazing we have that resource, but it is kind of expensive. Yeah. So what we typically recommend clients, and this goes for coming off of any type of hormone, or even coming off of like a harsh diet or like a competition prep, we recommend waiting about 3 months, because things are going to take time to stabilize. And if you were to get it done a little bit earlier, you might not really get that full picture. I'm not saying like 3 months to the day is like the perfect time to get it, but it's like it's a good amount of time to like see some changes. And even if someone is taking, if this goes for people who are taking exogenous hormones as well, if you were taking any kind of HRT, any kind of thyroid medication, it's generally recommended to stay on top of testing, because you don't know how your body is changing and responding to that medication. And I can't tell you how many clients I have who are on HRT who like the doses have not changed, like things are pretty similar, but then they start to feel certain effects, and then they get their blood work done, and it's all over the place, right? So it's just important to stay on top of it, because you really are guessing otherwise. And when we're talking about adding in or taking out compounds, the best way to know is to get semi-consistent, blood work again. Like if you do something like week to week, you're not going to see anything. But I would say 3 months is probably a good.
Yeah.
3-ish months is probably a good amount of time.
Yeah.
And then
6.
And then if you afterwards, if something comes up from that, then you can say, okay, let me address that. Let me either keep taking this, let me increase something, let me decrease something. And then if something is really off, then you can decide to retest in a few months after you make changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's exciting. And I again, we just wanted to cover this in a kind of a general sense as far as like your story. And I think that we wanted to make sure to kind of cover all those bases. And there's so many reasons why people come off or go on for their own personal decisions. So like you said, it's all about making an informed decision first and foremost.
Well, I think the main reason I had like the idea to talk about this is because when I was thinking about getting off of it, there was like no manual. There was like nothing that I could find like, here are some things to expect. These are some recommendations based off of like maybe normative data during this time and like recommendations from like gynecologists or physicians. And so I just spent weeks watching other girls' YouTube videos of like, here's my journey 3 months, a year off of birth control, just so I can have an idea of like what to expect. And here's the thing, like I saw all kinds of crazy stuff. Some chick lost hair like crazy, like some girl like gained a bunch of weight. Like there's a bunch of different responses, and so, but it was useful because then there were some things that I could take, like Christopher's like vegetable rich diet, definitely can do that. It's easy. Supplementing with some sort of like progesterone supplement, I can do that. Not super expensive. So yeah, like I was very frustrated that I didn't know what to expect, or like I couldn't find a direct answer. And so after the first month, I believe I posted a reel on just things I'm experiencing on my Instagram of coming off of birth control. But I was quite frustrated that there wasn't a whole lot of information on the transition of coming off of birth control, which, you know, maybe there will be one day, like, enough information to say, like, these are things you can expect, here's a protocol you might want to follow, that's more accessible to people. So that's what I kind of wanted to share.
I wanted to do this because that's the whole point, is to say, hey, here's this experience, here are some things that are rooted in science, that have scientific backing, and then, you know, obviously, like you said, lifestyle, diet, number one, adding in potential supplementation and or, you know, hormones as needed depending on the person, the individual. You know, that's really going to depend on obviously how the person's responding, how long they were on birth control, what type it was. You know, like there's just so many factors here. Like I've already accepted that, like I've been on this for so long that when I come off and like my age, I will most likely have to be on some type of HRT. I've just already accepted that maybe I won't, and that would be cool. But there's also a large chance that I might, or at least might need it for some period of time. And I think that just going into it saying, okay, what does my body actually need here? And it's the same way that like everybody responds differently when they're on it, right? Some people take certain, like we can give like 10 people the same product, whether it's like, you know, birth control or whatever it is, and they have all different responses. You know, like some people have IUDs and they have the best experience. Other people have IUDs and have horrendous experiences. And it's like,
same thing with like the shot and next one on.
Oh, that was the one I was thinking of, the shot. That's not really super common anymore, I don't feel like. But
Bovera.
I was like, I knew there was another one that I was thinking of, but
Just came to me.
Like the arm one, I've honestly never really heard any, and like the next one, never really heard any good stuff from that one, to be super honest. Do you know anybody who's had a good experience?
I know an Olympia bikini athlete who's on it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because almost every client I've had who's been on it or was on it had an issue. Again, just
but her genetics are like crazy. Like I don't think birth control is stopping her.
And not even that, like just like weird stuff. But the same thing with the IUDs. Like the IUDs are like 50-50. Like some people have them and have zero issues, but then the people who do have the issues have horrible pelvic inflammation. Like horrible. So I think
like
it's
they
just
can feel it, like it hurts.
Yeah,
like
and the little like micro tears that it causes. Like I think that's like my theory, is that for some people, it just happens to create these little kind of tears, and then it creates that inflammation response. And some people like, or their body's kind of just like projecting it. I'm not really sure as to why, but some I've just noticed those are very, very, very hit or miss. Whereas most people, when they take an an oral combination pill, it's generally pretty standard.
I mean, some people will be like, this one makes me feel crazy. This one makes me feel tired all the time. And I went through that as well, where I was like trying out birth controls, and there were definitely some that made me feel just like insane. Like I was like crying all the time, like just so crazy. And you hear that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. But as always, we just want to share experiences and, like I said, kind of create almost like a little bit of like a manual of sorts for people, because, you know, it really is frustrating. Obviously, you're super credible and have, you know, looked into this a lot and done this now. So sharing that. That's why I did like the breast dog vlogs, because like literally after surgery, I was like, nobody's posting anything besides like
I have no
here's what size I got, and I got like, I don't care. Like I guess my doctor that. You know what I mean? Like after a week, where are we at? If I want to go train in 3 weeks, what's happening? And I don't remember any of that shit now. Like I remember none of it. So like I'm so
glad you documented
so glad that and they were the worst videos. If anybody has been here since those videos, you guys know. They were just like me like propped up. It was like Christmas time, so it was like the tree, and I'm like sitting on the ground, and I'm like, so I just had augmentation. Like it was like so weird, but people still are like, I remember the BA vlogs. I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah, that's so funny.
The days. But anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Sorry once again for the lack of great sound. We still wanted to get this out because it's a really important message. So if you are interested in coaching services or checking out anything else that we offer, you can visit teamlocofit.com, and we will put some of those resources below that you did mention in the show notes as well. So we'll talk to you guys next week.